on page Yud Gimel, second paragraph on the page, second paragraph of Ois Hey, line 11, and we were speaking about the idea of B'tzalmeinu Kidmuseinu, just like we spoke about in the previous mimer, that there is B'tzalmeinu Kidmuseinu, which is there is the Tselem Shalom Mailo, and there's the Dmus Shalom Mailo, which is the Tselem, which is formed in exact dimensions and measurements like a person. So that could mimic a person. So that's just like a person's tam vadas avoida, the avoida that's mugbal, that's limited, that could mimic those levels in which it's a tselem of. Bitzalmeinu. In other words, there's a level which is considered a tselem of above. It's something that mimics the above. Why? Because the level of a person's limited service, the level of a person's tam vadas, that mimics those worlds that are Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, which are also limited, Tam Vadas, etc. Afterwards, we're going to talk about Kidmuseinu, likeness. We'll get to that as well. But now, he's going to elaborate some more about how do we say that our avodah down here, in our world, which is limited in a human body, can be in any way b'tselem, a form that's like measured in an exact fashion, practically, like what goes on in the worlds of Bri Yitzir Asiyah. And the question is going to be in comparison to the avodah of Malachim. So that's where we're going to start now, line 11. Though the avodah of those creations in the spiritual world that we mentioned before, that's the avodah of malachim. They're called removed intellects, separated intellects. Their level of intellect is beyond and above and removed from everything. Like the Rambam says, that is another expression for malachim, since they are separated from the material, physical existence. They are only a spiritual existence. In terms, the Rambam's terms, the neshama is called the tzura, the form, which is more fine and subtle, whereas the chaymer, the body, is called the chaymer, the material part. Beloy goylem klal, they have no, they're not a substance, a tangible substance. More like the expression brought down in Jewish philosopher, that malachim are beyond time and place. So, if they're so removed from us, how do we say that we are B'tzalmeinu, that our avoida can in any way be similar in form to what they do? So the Rebbe first of all explains, even though the Chokrim say, the Jewish philosophers say that they're beyond time and place, that doesn't mean that the entire idea of time and place does not exist for them. There is time and place for them, but not in the way that we know of time and place. So he says in line 17, the fact that they are beyond time and place is only concerning physical time and place. Not concerning spiritual time and place. That's to be found also by malachim. So now the Rebbe here in this mimer is going to enumerate and explain what does it mean makim beruchnius, place beruchnius, what does it mean time beruchnius. Line 20. The makim beruchnius concerning the idea of the spiritual aspect of space and place. It's brought down the laws, the foundations of the Torah. Right in the beginning of the Rambam, it's the level, it's the idea of the different levels that there are, the different qualities that there are. In other words, the Rambam over there is trying to explain what distinguishes one malach from another malach, since they don't occupy physical space and they don't have physical bodies, those creations of the physical world, so what divides them first and foremost is that I occupy a certain amount of space and another physical entity occupies another physical dimension of space, and a certain amount of that space is occupied by that being, etc. But when we're dealing with spiritual creations, like the malachim, what separates them in like distinct spaces, so that the different levels of malachim, that's the different space that they occupy. The Rambam explains, the Rebbe explains based on the Rambam, line 22, the idea of different levels that distinguishes one from another, that's to be found by malachim also. Like the Rambam wrote, that there are 10 names with which we find malachim referred to. There's Ishim, Esrafim, and Efanim, Echayis, etc., etc. Why do they have these 10 different names? When we have different names for things, we'll see this a lot of times on Amar Chazal, that when we have different names, it's not different names for the same thing. The classic example is Rabbi the Neshama. We find here the Neshama is called Nefesh, there the Neshama is called Ruach, somewhere else the Neshama is called Neshama, Chai, Yechida. So we don't just say, okay, the Neshama has different names. You could have a table, a chair, a bench, a seat, a sofa. They're all the same thing. No. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida, the fact that we find in different areas in Torah these names, this means these are different levels. The same thing, the fact that we find in different places in Torah 10 names of malachim, this means these are 10 distinct levels, that one is different from the other. Al Shem Eser Miles Shalahem, because of their 10 levels, and what distinguishes one level from another, one malach from another? It's because their service to Hashem is in a unique and different way than another malach. Just like we say that Malach Michal is on the right and Malach Gavriel is on the left. What does that mean? Obviously, we are attributing terms of place, right and left. These are places. And yet, alongside with using that, obviously doesn't mean physically right and left. Rather, right means chesed and ahava, like we'll soon explain, and left means yira and gvura. So therefore, space we see is levels and distinct types of avodah. Top of page Yudal Gufa is concerning Malach Michal himself. It's brought down the Zohar. Shemachne Michal Kuf Peivav Elef Machnus. The camp of Michal itself is really a compendium and a compilation of 186,000 camps, within which there are multiple malachim. Therefore, each one must have something that distinguishes them from a different malach. This indicates on all the different and many varied levels of the avodah of Michal, who's the midah of love of Hashem. So too concerning the other malachim, that there's many different sub-levels in whatever the general avodah is. For example, Gavriel is the avodah of Yira, and there's many camps in malachim within different levels of Yira. So just like we said, there's the idea of makim ruchni, so too there's the level of zman ruchni. Derech Hagav, the Rambam uses a very gishmaka term when he talks about this makim ruchni. If I remember correctly, it's the Rambam says it over there in Chisisodia Torah, that just like you will say that one chacham is higher than another chacham, it doesn't mean that he's standing he lives on the third floor instead of on the second floor. Higher, which is a term associated with place, with makim, is something that has to do with level. The same thing we are talking about, they're a spiritual place by the malachim because of the distinct levels that they are at. So just like there's distinct levels and occupying spiritual space, so too there's distinctions in time and areas in time in the spiritual sense, as we'll soon explain what that means. So he says in lines 5, the idea of time is what precedes and what follows. What is the spiritual concept of that? So he says, when you have a cause and you have an effect, so he'll say, Seichel brings about the midas. Chachma is the ilah for bina. So it's not a matter of time above because there is no time. But there is the concept in a spiritual sense of time because you cannot have bina without chachma. A midah needs to be created by seichel. And many other things that throughout Seder Ishtalshlus is in a way of ilah v'olu. So though there is no time over there, but in concept there is idea of time because A must precede B. It must be that initially should have been the cause and only afterwards should be the result. First the cause and then the consequence or the outcome. Even in the supernal levels of ilah v'ol, there's the idea of what preceded and what came after. That's the idea of time. So now that we've established that in the spiritual realms there is also makom and zman, space and time, though it is spiritual, now we can understand that a person in his avodah can be called in the form of above. Just like the limbs of a sculpture, of a statue, imitate the limbs of a human being in its size and dimensions, so too a person's avodah down here can copy and correspond to the avodah in the worlds of Bri Yitzirasiyam. So he says in line 11, moving for this understood. When a person does the service, though his avodah is in a physical place and time, the difference between his service and the service of the malachim, the entire distinction is, this is a person's service is in physical and under the physical dimensions of his service, and malachim is spiritual dimensions. But there's no essential difference to say this doesn't apply at all to malachim. It does. The kishen just like over here, there's time and place. So too over there in the worlds of Bri Yitzirasi and the world of the malachim, there's also time and place. But it's spiritual. And we actually find that this also applies in certain things that we talk about the malachim in what they do and what they are even measured by. So we say, sometimes we find that a malach is also grasped. In other words, he finds himself somehow within the realm and within the measure of physical time and place. Concerning place, where do we see the malachim relate even to physical place? Like the statement of Chazal, malach b'shlish olam oimed. A malach is a third of the world. Now, or occupies a third of the world. Now, I translated it in one way, but as we know, Lashon Kodesh has the ability to be translated multiple ways, and that's you can say now in the parentheses. Like the two opinions in the translation of Malach b'shlish ha'olam oimed, im ha'malach u'shlish ha'olam, is a malach only a third of the space of the world. Or even more so, maybe the malach is 3 times the size of the world. The meaning of this phrase, malach b'shlish ha'olam oimid, means that the world is a third of a malach. Either way, we find that a malach doesn't just relate to spiritual place, but he also relates to physical place. And actually, this also has to do with Parshas Vayetze, concerning Yaakov, in Chenis of the Gemara, so too it's brought on the Gemara in the Gel, Sulam. Shemalach Elkim Olam v'Yerdem Boy, that Yaakov Avinu saw the ladder in his dream, that the Malachim of Hashem were going up, rising, and going down. So it says, so the Gemara derives as follows. There's going to be a whole calculation, but I'll just tell it to you outside first. When it says Malachim Oilim going up, Oilim is plural, so that's at least 2 Malachim. When it says Malachim is Yerdim, so that's again 2 Malachim. Now it doesn't say that they took turns. Since it doesn't say that they took turns, that means there must have been enough space on the ladder for 2 Malachim to go up at the same time that 2 Malachim are going down. Therefore, the Gemara derives from that, because soon we will determine that a malach is 2,000 amos, 2,000 cubits. 2,000 parsecs, whatever that measurement is. And because each malach is 2,000, multiply it by 4, 2 going up, 2 going down. So the ladder that Yaakov Avinu saw was 8,000 parsecs. Let's see inside. The end of line 23, bottom of your dalet. Kama roch b'shel sulam. How much is the width of this ladder that Yaakov Avinu saw in his dream? Shmoinus halofim parsecs. It was 8,000 parsam. Oilim shnayim v'yardim shnayim. Havalahu arba. Since it says 2 went up and 2 went down, so you had 4 malachim on the ladder simultaneously. And it says, top of page Tezvav. It says concerning the malach, and his body is like sarshish. Now, what does that mean? So there's a sea that was called sarshish ugemiri, and we have it by our tradition. The Chachamim in the Gemara had by tradition the sarshish trei alfi parsehoy avo. The sea of Sarshish was 2,000 parsa. So therefore, since it says malach ugviyosek is Sarshish, a malach, his body is like the sea of Sarshish. Sarshish was 2,000 amma. You have 4 malachim on the ladder simultaneously. So that's 4 times 2. So the ladder is 8,000 parsa. And also, this fits in with at least one of the explanations, shezel shlish oilom, that we said a malach is a third of the world, according to that explanation of that phrasing, because sha'olam kuloi shita alpha parsi, because the entire world is 6,000 parsi, and therefore the malach, who's as big as the Tarshish, which is 2,000 parsi, is a third of the world. It's a lot of interesting stuff, and I'm sure, you can open up the Gemara. It's a Masechtas Chulin. It gives the footnotes. You can look it up exactly where it is. It's in Chulin 91b. You can look it up. There's Mefarshim on it. You can have the time of your life on it. I'm not going to spend time on it. The main point of all this lengthy ideas is that a malach is not even removed from physical place. True, his place is spiritual place, but he does have some type of relationship somehow with physical space, to the degree that we can determine by the malach why the ladder of Yaakov Avinu's dream was. And if he wouldn't have any connection with physical space whatsoever, so that we can never have made this determination. So here we see that a malach is not just relating and has to do and lives in a place of spiritual place, but also he relates to physical place as well. Now, just like we did that, and we explained this concerning place, we're going to do the same thing concerning time, that not just does a malach relate to spiritual time and lives in spiritual time, but he even relates to a degree with physical time as well. So line 3 on page Tezvav, similar to this concerning time, we find the Medrash. How did Moshe Rabbeinu know when he was in Har Sinai what when was day and when was night? Say, when he heard the Malachim recited Kaddish, 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 Yadash is a Yom, he knew that's day. That's the shir that the Malachim say by day. Okay, Shama and Baruch, when he heard it, they're saying Baruch, Yadash is a Laila, he knew that this was night. It's appropriate. We're just coming from Yutas Kislev. One of the stories with Alter Rebbe in prison was that they tried to disorient the prisoners in the prisons, and that was how to break down the defenses and to be able to interrogate them, etc., etc. So once they had a light burning, they made sure that there was always a light burning in the room, a fire burning, a candle burning entirely in the room, but it was closed off from any outside illumination. So you couldn't tell by the illumination in the room if it was day or night. And once 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I think it was, one of the interrogators came in and said, why are you up? It's bedtime already. Shouldn't you be in bed? So the Alter Rebbe said, no, it's not nighttime. It's exactly 5 minutes past the hour of 2. And he was shocked because the Alter Rebbe was right. So the Alter Rebbe explains that based on the tzirufim of Shem Hashem above, there's different combinations of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei that shine. Combinations mean how you spell out Yud Kei Vav Kei, Yud Kei Vav Kei, or Hey Yud Vav Hey, or Vav Yud Hey Hey, or whatever. There's 12 different permutations of that, and that goes through 12 hours of the daylight, and then there's 12 hours of nighttime, which is 12 permutations of the letters Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud. Just in short, again, in the spirit of Yitzchak Kislev, there was a similar story. The Alter Rebbe had a clock on his table, and there was a rich person that once came into the Alter Rebbe's room for Yechidus. I think he was waiting for the Alter Rebbe or something, and he was very proud of himself. He had this pocket watch that he felt was exact, and he saw the clock on the Alter Rebbe's table did not exactly fit the time in his pocket watch, and he changed it. And the Alter Rebbe, caught him and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "This is Russian time." So he says, "No. This clock on the table is the correct time. It goes according to the tzurufim of above." But anyway, returning to our topic, that the idea of day and night was linked to when the Malachim say Kaddish and Baruch. So what does that mean? That there is a certain consciousness of Malachim of night and day. Line 8, from this, it's obvious and clear. The Malachim occupy and relate to physical time and place, physical day and night. That these are the 40 days and 40 nights that's mentioned in Chumash concerning Moshe Rabbeinu when he was in a physical body, and he took up and he knew when it was day and night above because of the Baruch and Kaddish, Kaddish, Kaddish. And corresponding to this was the manner of the avodah of the Malach. Similar to this is on the other side. In other words, once we've established that the Malachim have not only the idea of spiritual place and spiritual time, but they even relate and are nitfis, in the expression of Maimer, in physical place and physical time. So, in similar vein, one would think that the neshama is only, the neshama when it's down here in this world, only relates to physical place and physical time. So just like malachim are not limited to spiritual space and spiritual time, the neshama down here is not limited to physical space and physical time, but it also has spiritual space and spiritual time. Let's see it inside. Line 12. The neshama down here below could also be in such a state and situation that transcends physical time and physical place. For example, where do we see an example that everybody, this applies to everybody? Of course, we know about tzaddikim that totally, they were oila l'mayla and they lost, track of time. And they had no idea what's going on around them. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the average person, the average yid, has a way of transcending time. When a person studying Torah, Chazal say whoever is involved in the study of the laws of the carbon oil, it is considered as if he actually brought the oil carbon. And to such a degree that the Chazal even say, it's a nice thing to say, it's as if. But practically, is it the same? So the Chazal go on to say, the Gemara at the end of Masechtas Tainis says that by a person learning the halachas of the karbonis, that Hashem forgives all their sins. And therefore, it's considered. The Gemara has a whole story. It's in the beer on the side over there that Avraham Avinu was concerned. What's going to happen? Who's going to forgive? How the Yidden going to get atonement? So Hashem said the Beis Hamikdash is going to atone for them. But he said what's going to happen when the Beis Hamikdash becomes destroyed? So he says when they go ahead and learn the halachas, so then it will atone for them. Meaning it's exactly the same idea like the Hakravas HaKarbon. V'hainu, yet they're learning the halachas of the carbon. They're accomplishing what the carbon is supposed to accomplish, which is forgiveness of sin, but they're not at the right time and place of it. V'hainu shegam kasher limadu balayla, even when he's studying by night, which nighttime is not a time when one can offer a carbon, and the carbon is not a valid carbon if someone brought it by night. Ubechutz la'aretz. And if he's learning this, not just by night, but he's learning it outside of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore he's not being makar of the carbon in the right place, he's missing the Makim Gashmi, he's missing the Zman Gashmi he's supposed to have. And not only that, V'aloimed ein a kohen, he's not the right person. So he's not even a kohen. Similar to this, all the other limitations that need to be in a carbon, this person does not have when he's sitting and learning. Yet, it's considered as if he brought a carbon oila and he gets atoned for his sins because of it. And the same thing, whatever other carbonis that he needs to have atonement through, and so on. So what we have over here is how a person, even though he's in a shaman, in a physical world, in a physical body, that usually we would say he's under the limitations and within the paradigms of physical time and physical place and actual place and time, still in all, he can transcend that and be beyond physical time and place, just like the flip side where a malach cannot just be in a place of spiritual place of and time, but he could come down here into the physical place and time. And because of that, we can say, B'tzalmeinu, that we are in the form of above, that our avodah can be considered the same shape and measure, just like a sculpture and a statue is the same shape and the measure of the human being that's representing the same thing. Our avodah down here can be considered in the same shape, b'tzalmeinu, of the avodah in the worlds of Bri Yitzir Asiyah. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the idea of Kidmuseinu. Kidmuseinu means it's not the same, it's only a likeness, and That is talking about a level that's higher than Bri Yitzira Asiyah. That's talking about Natzilus and our avodah of Bli Gvul, and higher than understanding, as we will talk about tomorrow.